Well, welcome back to my channel, y'all. It's me, Mama King, and it's time for another reading of The Great Cosmic Mother, just rediscovering the religion of the earth. And I'm going to read from pages 276 to, oh boy, it's called Split in the Garden, 276, and it goes to page 287. Okay. Um, we'll stick with that for now. So let's go ahead and get started. If you found the page to follow along, if not, then we'll just listen. Split in the Garden. The biblical myth of Eve and Adam and their expulsion from the Garden of Eden is another tale of the separation of the female from the male at Yahweh's command. According to Hebrew and Christian teachings, Eve, the first woman, is the cause of the fall of humanity from paradise into earthly suffering. She is the source of original sin. In Genesis are all the recognizable elements of the much more ancient Mother Goddess myth, symbol, and ritual. Here is the garden of the goddess and her wise cosmic serpent, the tree of knowledge with its dark soma fruit, the fig of the Cretan goddess, which became for Westerners the magic apple of the European white goddess. Here also is a strong trace of Near Eastern creation mythology, which tells us how the Great Mother shaped the first human beings from earth dust and her own saliva, and then breathed her breath of life into them. Eve means life, and Eve is called the mother of all living. Adam means son of the Red Mother Earth. These legends, these creation myths, go back thousands of years before the Hebrew patriarchs wrote the Bible. But in Genesis, it is a Father God who creates all life, and the first woman is born from a man's body. A very interesting biological reversal. In this opening book of the Bible, the historic political ideology, I hope I said that right, ideology of the patriarchs is clearly stated. The new male god forbids Adam and Eve to participate in the sacred mystery of rites of the great goddess. They may not eat of her fruit and gain transcendent knowledge. Of course, Eve, who was the priestess of the goddess, disobeyed Yahweh's command. She tries, with the magic aid of her serpent, to persuade Adam to partake with her of the narcotic fruit and sexual rites, leading to ecstatic elimination and rebirth in the goddess's garden of immorality. I'm sorry, immortality. There is a difference, okay? And this is original sin, and it is in quotes here in the book, in the established doctrines of the Hebrew and Christian religion. Lilith in Hebrew legend was the rebellious woman created before Eve. She was portrayed as part snake and wearing wings, the winding serpent who is Lilith, and was blamed by Yahweh for having tempted Eve to reveal and initiate Adam into the mysteries of the garden. Lilith represented the ancient Canaanite worship of Astarte, Asherah, and also Ishtar of Babylon. Her relation to the very old snake and bird goddess is obvious, and her rebellious, naughty mysteries were those of yoga, of kundalini and spinal illumination, mysteries and techniques indigenous to the Near East as well as to Europe and India, until the Hebrew patriarchs set out to censor them. Far into medieval European Christian imagery, the serpent in paradise is pictured with a woman's head and breasts. Significantly, Eve's punishment for her sin consists of patriarchal marriage. Her desire must be only for her husband. She must leave her garden and follow him over the barren male ordered earth, condemned to unwanted pregnancies and painful childbirth. In other words, ooh, patrilocal marriage, in which she is isolated from the woman's collective the women's collective and deprived of her ancient knowledge of herbal contraception and narcotics used for painless labor. Wow, isn't that interesting? It's amazing how all this is tied to modern life, right? She is no longer priestess and midwife to the goddess. She will now bear children bitterly, and they will belong to the man. She must also passively make love to Adam on her back, he enacting the male sky father over her meek female earth. She must play the role of corrupt matter, chained to a husband, forever striving to free his immortal spirit from her. Eve is every woman, with other world creation myths reduced to only fairy tales. The Old Testament Genesis is still treated with seriousness and respect in the Western political and cultural world. Even people who are not practicing Jews or Christians are affected by it, for the patriarchal notions enshrined in Genesis are at the base of all our culture, political, and economic institutions. In contradictions, mm, in contradictions to the U.S. Constitution, we might add American law and custom have always been heavily influenced by the Bible because the men who make law and custom have been raised to believe the Bible is the truth. No need to point out to women in the 1980s that anti abortion legislation, job discrimination, pay inequality, inequity, and marriage laws against women are still roundly justified in the U.S. Congress as God's will. Genesis is quoted to prove that God designed women to be dependent helpmates to men. Interesting. Any legislation or custom that might free women from such economic or biological or social independence, anything that might further women's autonomy of choice is bulldozed by the Bible quoters as a threat to the family, i.e., the biblical patriarchal family, which has indeed historically depended on female slave labor. Sex, sex iniquity, otherwise known as God's plan for man, has for 2 millennia been a major bastion of support for a class economic system designed to profit the few by underpaying the many. God is used to justify this system because all else fails to justify it. And the God of Genesis, who wrote the rules for sex inequality, but it says iniquity, for sex iniquity in our part of the world. Inequity. It's not equal. I can't say that word. Okay. And the God of Genesis, who wrote the rules for sex inequality in iniquity in our part of the world. Because that word iniquity is used a lot in the Bible, but I don't know if that is what I'm saying or if this was actually what the word means, okay, in the Bible. Because clearly it's an illusion. Anyway, now sits in the executive boardrooms of our most global corporations, okay, making sure these archaic but lucrative discriminations are interwoven tightly into our high tech futures. Indeed, in July 1969, an American manned spaceship left a microfilm of the Bible buried in the dust of the moon at taxpayers' expense. I would love to see that. One giant step backward from womankind and the moon. Okay. Talk about illusion. So, and isn't the moon tied to the feminine energy? Interesting. The Genesis story of Cain and Abel, the sons of Eve and Adam, continues the process of the Hebrew patriarchs' political struggle against the goddess. As already noted, the good brother Abel was a shepherd like his nomadic sky father worshiping prototypes. The bad brother Cain was an archaeologist He worked in agriculture, representing the settled farmers of the neighboring matriarchal people of Canaan. Throughout the Near East and Mesopotamia, generally, the agricultural balance or abundance of the Neolithic was the Garden of Eden, a fertile and long sustained paradise of earthly and spiritual existence. The Bronze Age, raiding, plundering, and spreading warfare by sky god warriors and nomadic pastoralists was breaking up this garden into fortressed cities and destroying Eden. Perhaps the nomadic perhaps the nomadic sheep herders and cattle herders deeply coveted the settled agricultural life as much as they officially despised it. Hmm. At any rate, ritualized, a goddess oriented Neolithic agriculture was bad until the new mail order could take it over and work it for gain. Generally, when men took over control of agricultural work, developing the plow and other large scale earth working tools, they also began to develop ideas of the male as a cosmic generative principle. Watching grain seed germinating as if of itself in the earth, they could conceive of the male seed as containing already in itself the whole germ energy of life. Long into the Middle Ages, people believed that a drop of male semen contained a complete miniature fetus. Some notable scholars claimed to be able to see this tiny this teeny being, and even draw pictures of it. Until the Bronze Age, the growth of the grain seed was believed to be caused by emanations of the moon, combined with nourishment from rain and the earth. The law of matriarchy had governed agriculture, all produce gathered not according to the right of the seed, but the right of the soil. The seed takes on the nature of the soil, not the soil of the seed. Listen, I'm gonna leave it. Okay, never mind. But male dominated agriculture evolved the concept of the earth as inert matter, simply a nourisher of the male generated life seed. By analogy, the human or animal mother was simply a passive receptacle for the father's seed, who contained the child they believed. When seed is thrown into the earth or into the womb, there is no difference, wrote Galenos, Galenos. Plowing was experienced by men as forced sex, a rape of the earth, the rape of dumb matter by enlightened spirit, and woman was as the humble furrow, where proud man sows his seed. The female ovum or egg wasn't discovered until 1827. So for 2,000 to 4,000 years of patriarchy, all religious, philosophical, biological, and medical theories were based on the assumption of the male as the sole generative, physical, and cosmic force. From being seen for so long as a little more than openers of the womb, so fertilization could occur between women and the spirits. Men in the Bronze Age came to see themselves as sole parents of life. The male gods swelled and erupted with this heady recognition. And like the Sumerians drowned in Enki's semen, we still live in the ontological fallout, elaborated by generations of male brains. The Bronze Age vision of women as earth to be conquered and made fertile remains intact. Freud saw libido as wholly male, and from that theorized that all creativity is male also. Marriage under patriarchy was then seen as a symbolic union of sacred spirit, man, and profane matter, woman. Patriarchal marriage is conceptually a kind of legal, mechanical attempt to reunify the original male female principles split apart by the Father God. But the reunion is all on his terms, dualistic role playing rather than organic, gynandrous fusions in the psyche of each partner. Husband and wife are one, and the one is him. Women have been made to act out the unintegrated negative aspect of yin yang. Woman is earthbound. Through her, you grow roots in the dark, the hidden in earth and magic. The flesh is sinful. Sinful is she. Deepest inside man is spirit, and spirit wants to climb into freer spheres. Because of this, the spirit fights the body, the flesh, and is ashamed when he lets himself be led astray. Deep. That's some deep shit, y'all. Uh-huh. The classical Greeks practiced ideal homosexuality, platonic love. The goddesses Sybil and Ishtar had allowed ecstatic sodomy in their temples and made no prohibition of physical love between males. But as Robert Graves points out, ideal homosexuality was an attempt by the male intellect to free itself spiritually from the goddess, to make itself cosmically self sufficient. It was a philosophical extension of patriarchal cultural strategy. If the physical female world can be reduced to meaningless material, then the idealizing mind male is justified in manipulating, exploiting, and even destroying it. And thereafter, the male mind is defined by its ability to organize the natural world into rational categories for objective study and use. Socrates, the proponent of ideal homosexuality, was contemptuous of mythic and poetic thought processes. He turned his philosophical back on ancient mysteries and trained himself to think scientifically. In fact, Socrates thought verbally, turning multidimensional, multisensual life process into a linear dialogue between aristocratic male minds. Socrates, the world's most famous obsessive talker, complained publicly that his wife, um, Xantippe, Xantippe, I don't know, I've never heard this name before, but it's Xantippe. He said she talked too much, okay? She is famous justly for dumping a pot of piss over his head. That's my girl. Anyway, so when Socrates once did ponder the nonverbal unknown, however, he appealed to Diotima, the inspired Pythia, to reveal that life beyond that to reveal what lay beyond him, and she disclosed to him the essence of the goddess, okay? Behind every great man, you know the rest. Okay. So in Socrates' time, the realities of the ancient Cretan and Mycenaean cultures were remembered only as legends of a past golden age. What remained of Mother Goddess symbols and rituals were practiced in secret cults by women and country peasants. The Aryan the Aryan invaders from Central Asia had, in late Minoan times, already begun a systematic falsification of the existing myths. Apollo's priests proclaimed that rational poetic language and thought were to replace the inspired poetic language of the goddess. From then on, poetry, language itself, ceased to be mantic utterance and became a social ornament and political device. Rhetoric. Socrates thought that the understanding of myth and symbols was irrelevant to self knowledge. He was also, of course, a townsman. He talked endlessly about life, but was far removed from the sources and consequences of his own living, eating, breathing, shitting, and dying. Ancient myths and rituals were based on tree lore, on seasonal observations of life in the fields, on the body's direct and rhythmic relation to nature's rhythms. But from the time of Socrates, culture in the Western world was meant, or has meant, may meant male urban elite culture based on an intellectual contempt for the revelations and customs of country life. J. Bachofen, the first modern researcher into matriarchal societies, was also quite eloquent in his justifications of patriarchal culture. To him, the maternal society was also the undifferentiated unity of the mass. He found exclusively and privilege abhorrent to Mother Earth. Exclusivity and privilege abhorrent to Mother Earth. Yeah, did I read that right? He found exclusivity and privilege abhorrent to Mother Earth, her children living communally and practicing orgiastic sexuality. Paternity, on the other hand, introduced the principle of differentiation and restriction, leading to higher spirituality. So, the triumph of paternity brings with it the liberation of the spirit from the manifestations of nature, a sublimation of human existence over the laws of material life. While while childbearing motherhood is bound up with the earth that bears all things, the father, a begetter, stands in no visible relationship to the children or to the child. He discloses an immateriality over against which the sheltering and nourishing mother appears as matter and as place and nurse of generation. The son's self sacrifice to his begetter, the father, requires a far higher degree of moral development because the relation is mainly an abstract idea than mother love, that mysterious power that equally permeates all earthly creatures. Bachofen speaks of the formless and odorless freedom of Aphrodite. Orderless, I'm sorry. Say what? The formless and orderless freedom of Aphrodite without private rights and property, subservient to matter and natural life, and to the harmony of the universe, which they had not yet outgrown. Under the moon, the law of matter prevailed, the world of endless becoming with death as a twin of life. She who awakens life works for death. Death is the lot of children born to a mother, but with patriarchy, mother right is left with the animals. Immortality, is restricted to matter, which male spirit, purified from the slag of matter, rises up to immortality and immateriality, a supra material life belonging to the regions of imperishable light in the halls of the sun. Back Bachofen gets very elaborate in his praise of the new disembodied Apollyon male soul in its triumph over the ecstatic mystery god, son of the Great Mother. Apollo frees himself entirely from any bond with woman. His paternity is motherless in spirit as in adoption, hence immortal, immune to the night of death, which forever confronts Dionysus because he is phallic. Mm. Consistent with this, Bachofen praised the emergence of the male individual ego at the cost of the human community. The individual leaf has no importance on the mother tree. All that is begotten belongs to the mother soil that encloses it. To the patriarchal Greek and Roman, the glory of the city was that it separated him from the fields. It defined him as a political animal. He could completely structure his world with his mind and slave labor, and so free himself from nature. Political is from polis, which means city. The city was man's number one tool with which he could achieve the manipulation and subordination of the natural world. She, the natural world, is she. Okay? Bachofen accordingly glorified Rome. Rome started the struggle for freedom from nature and natural needs. That marks the historical trend of Christianity and replaces it with a political idea that overruns everything and molds everything to its own needs. Rome indeed carried on a ruthless struggle to raise the patriarchal political state above religion and imposed a historical linear view of the universe instead of the former cosmic cycle view. The prestige of maternity was banished from the law of the state. Rome cast off natural law, annihilated matriarchal Carthage, the city of Carthage, and eradicated every trace of the great matriarchal Etruscan culture. Irreplaceable knowledge and experience were lost through this destruction. Backelfin says, however, what justified the colossal destruction Rome brought was the spiritual liberation following the ascendancy of historical consciousness over the natural idea and cosmic law. Western life truly begins with Rome. Indeed. Great highway builders, Rome rejects the law of material necessity and upholds the superiority of the human mind over the messages of nature, earth, and cosmos. Everywhere he, the Roman male, regards himself as the first factor in historical life. Among Rome's first edicts was the subjugation of women and children to the complete control of the fathers, who were given life and death power over all members of the family. This is called by Backelfin as eminently ethical achievement. Yes, but King Servius, who founded the Roman community, was himself probably an Etruscan. He was conceived at a sacred festival of the goddess, the son of his mother, and the Latin League was dedicated by him to the Aventine Temple of Diana. Upper class Roman patrons, upper class Roman, yeah, patrons were solars consecrated, while the plebes, the common people, hope I'm saying that, patricians, Roman patricians, I think that's more correct, were solar consecrated, while the plebes, which were the common people, were dedicated to the Magna Mater, the primal mother. Interesting. Ceres was their protectress, and the community confided its treasury, its laws, and the decisions of the Senate to her temple, believing nothing could be falsified there. Okay. In Athens, also, the popular assembly was identified with Demeter, the Earth Mother. Earth Mother. So the city emerges as man's ultimate attempt to become man made, born from himself rather than from Mother Nature. So the feeling of self-sufficiency he achieves through the city is largely abstract and spurious. The sources of our biological lives remain the same as they always were. They come from matter and land, but city man maintains contact with his natural life sources not through immediate body experience, but through an artificial medium of exchange, which is money. He no longer works with the earth, he buys it. The ancient energy exchange between humans and nature becomes a money exchange between humans only. Norman O. Brown writes in Life Against Death, money is at the heart of the new accumulation complex. The capacity of money to bear interest is its energy. Its body is that fundamental institution of civilized man, the city. The archaeologists note the complete rupture from the previous cycle of the previous style of life, which marks the foundations of the first cities. The institution of interest-bearing capital is the key to this abrupt reorganization. A city reflects the new masculine aggressive psychology of revolt against the female principles of dependence and nature. So there arose the city-state, seeds of the modern nations, organized around a professional male priesthood, politicians, and specialist workers living off an often artificially forced agricultural surplus, forced by slave labor in the past, forced by chemicals today. The centralizing idea of city-state was was an identification of the divine king with the sun god. This new male god ruler was seen as a dispenser of divine justice, order, and measurement, all the ancient functions of Maat and the moon goddess. The sun father was a lord of the crops and measurer of the new solar seasons. It was the sun now who was seen to germinate the seed with his phallic sunbeams, a false notion. The sun is a necessary but not a sufficient cause of life. All plants receive sunlight, but only the one with earth and water grows anything. Okay. The Sun King also determined the agricultural taxes by which the production of the country was hijacked to support the growing urban elites who lived luxuriously while the landed farmers and peasants were impoverished. Around 3000 to 2000 BC, the life of the citizen began to displace and dominate that of the country villager. The earliest solar wheel was found in Mesopotamia during circa 4000 BC. By the time of the Roman Empire, every aspect of life was dominated by the demands and lifestyles of the urban centers. The famous Roman roads, built by slaves, were meant to transport armies and weaponry outward into tribal territories. The wealth of the plundered earth, in the form of food, metals, and human slaves, was then transported back into Rome to support the increasingly complex way of life at its imperial urban heart. Rome was the central sun, with lines radiating from it in all directions. Highways of power allowed conquest and speed. The Roman way, the highways of export expropriation, carried all the earth's bounty back into city coffers. All roads lead to Rome. The city broke down the organic life of the tribe and the agricultural village. It brought about the final destruction of the matriarchy and instituted the patriarchal rule of abstract urban law and order. Phallic psychology led to aggressive manipulation of life materials, lifestyles, and life energies, and the rape of nature by technical, mechanical means. All this was understood as a conquest of male mind over female matter. Living as we do in the full apotheosis of the intellectual sun god's victory over matter, with its results tricking over our heads every second in the form of global annihilation. The boyish enthusiasm of the past 4,000 years over its newly discovered male mind and male seed power can leave us a little queasy. The taste of victory has turned more than a little sour. In the 4,000-year-old epic of Gilgamesh, our hero sets out on a sacred quest to slay the Sumerian forest demon, Huwawa. The purpose of this sacred quest for Gilgamesh and his friend Enkidu is, in Thompson's words, to make a name for themselves, a name that can live on after them, a moment to the ego. Because Gilgamesh reasons this is the only way men can conquer death, because he has established the ego of man on a linear phallic course. He can no longer return to the cycles of nature or be a part of the organic life and death cycles of the Great Mother. Man's ego and its victories now constitute his whole isolated identity, a historic identity. Gilgamesh does slay the forest demon, who is a mother and is left alone with his famous name. Civilized, morbidly self conscious, man's desire to overcome earth and death and the bondage of flesh and woman only creates a vaster kind of death for himself, for he has killed off everything sacred. Now he must truly die alone, as Thompson writes. The ego has definitely arrived on the scene of history as it is screaming out against this cosmic isolation. Before, all the processes of culture were connected with the cycles of nature. In death, tribal man simply returned to the Great Mother. But when civilized man sets up walls between himself and the forest, and when he sets up his personal name against the stars, he ensures that the now isolated ego will cry out in painful recognition of its complete alienation in the fear of death. Significantly, the murder of the forest always leads to the desert. Deserts always seem like ancient environments, but in fact, they are the youngest environments on Earth. Most deserts are man made. They are what's left after everything else has been conquered or used up. In the Quran, in the Qumran, Qumran, in the Quran, and Marabas at caves and the drift cliffs on the shores of the Dead Sea, hundreds of scrolls have been found since 1947, some of them dating 1,000 years older than any Hebrew copy of the Old Testament seen before. These scrolls constituted um, the library of a Jewish monastic community that was located in the area before and during the time of Christ. It is believed by some that the historic Christ, the man who was Christ, spent time in the community and incorporated many of the doctrines and worldviews into his teachings. Others believe that the idea or figure of Christ was based on several men, teachers of righteousness, who came from this or similar communities at that time. As the Dead Sea Scroll texts and other extra biblical writings dated centuries before Christ show, Jewish religious mystics of radical sects such as the Essenes were approaching and enunciating a vision of the Jewish Messiah many generations before Christ, a Messiah in strong contrast to the Orthodox teachings of the Old Testament prophets, though fulfilling many of their ideas. The Messiah of the Jewish Dead Sea Scroll sects were not only to be a political, historic redeemer of the Hebrew people, he was also being shaped in their visions into a divinely appointed and apocalyptic savior figure. In the order of the Qumran community's messianic banquet, it was ritually stated that God, Yahweh, would beget this Messiah. According to a major authority on the Dead Sea Scrolls, John Allegro, we appear then to have in Qumran thought already the idea of the lay Messiah as the Son of God, begotten of the Father, a Savior in Israel. The Messianic banquet was reserved for the male initiated elect of the community and was seen as a pattern or rehearsal of the divine banquet that would be held for the elect who survived the great purging of the world in the last days. This messianic banquet, of course, prefigures the Last Supper. So many basic elements and ideas of Christianity were written down in the Dead Sea text. In fact, that many Christians were very upset when the scrolls were first revealed and their contents published. They did not want to give ancient Jews credit, not simply for the birth of Jesus, but for almost the entire ideological substance of their Christian religion. Study of the scrolls reveals, however, that this credit is due. The scrolls contains hymns of the Qumran sect, hymns which refer to angels and the devil, Belial and the angel of darkness, Satan, to heaven and burning hell, to the God ordained dualisms of truth versus perversity, of debased flesh versus redeemed spirit, of the children of light versus the children of darkness, and to the hope of redemption by God from the sins of the world. The scrolls speak of the Prince of Light who was about to come and save the faithful Jews, not only from Roman domination, but most of all from the corrupt Orthodox Jewish priesthood in Jerusalem. Apparently, the major enemies of these monastic desert communities. In hymns and other texts, the Qumran initiates spoke of the redemption of human sin by God's grace and elaborated their doctrine of human perfection, i.e., the new covenant of Christianity. In fact, the sect called itself the New Covenant. The Qumran sect began sometime between 135 and 104 BC and ended in AD 70. Their ideas of the Christ-like teacher of righteousness, referred to as the Anointed One, Messiah, predate the New Testament by at least a century. In a world seemingly falling apart through incessant warfare, social and political corruption, the Qumran community practiced strict ascetic discipline, regulating every aspect of daily life. They were communal in all things, practicing humility, opposing lying and negligence. Some of their penalties were extreme. For indecent exposure during bodily movement, the initiate was penalized by 30 days deprivation of rations, which were thin enough. Foolish laughter brought down the same 30 days. For unnecessary self exposure of the genitals of the genitals, the penalty was 6 months. Such practices were designed to wean the male spirit from all attachment to or identification with the earth or the human body. Indeed, they conditioned a revulsion to these things. Though the Jewish ensigns were traditionally celibate, apparently there were some female initiates in some of these communities. But the hymns, doctrines, and customs of the Qumran communities were very misogynistic. I said it. So, in Allegro's words, women were seen essentially as potential seducers of men from the straight and narrow way, and the documents show an obsession with whores and the snares of the flesh. And one scroll from the fourth cave is a hymn warning about harlots. In perversion, they handle her befouled organs of lust. They penetrate the orifice of her legs in wicked acts and behave with guilty rebelliousness. Pits of hell. The sins within her skirts are many. Her garments are the muck of twilight. Her adornments are tainted with corruption. Her bed is a couch of defilement, depths of the pit. She is the foremost of the ways of sin, and alas, all who take her will come to ruin. Her eyes glance keenly hither and thither beneath her voluptuous heavy lids, looking for a righteous man to seduce him, a perfect man to make him stumble, upright men to lead them astray, those chosen for uh, rectitude to shun the commandment. As Allegro notes, all such warnings against the wiles of the harlot were in reality denouncements of pagan religion. They also record a general attitude about women and sex that led most of these desert monks to renounce marriage. Who was Jesus Christ? Clearly, the New Testament Messiah came from or was at least deeply influenced by these Jewish Essenes and Essene like monastic communities. However, the New Testament writers melded the Qumran concept of a teacher of righteousness with the Hebrew prophetic tradition of a historic Messiah or political redeemer of the Hebrew people. Most of the New Testament disciples, including the gospel writers, were Jewish males who could easily have absorbed this mixture of Orthodox and radical Jewish messianic ideas, including their Qumran elaboration into a divinely appointed Savior or Son of God who promised redemption of the soul from sin and even salvation of the elect at the end of the world, which was seen to be imminent. These Jewish messianic ideas were then interwoven by the gospel writers or by the time itself, which was volatile with the ancient pagan images of the dying God. For the gospel stories of Jesus are thick with symbols pulled from Babylon, Sumerian, Egyptian, and in general Neolithic rites of the vegetation deity, Tammuz, Dumuzi, Adonis, Osiris, Dionysus, etc., who was sacrificed on the mother tree for the renewal or rebirth of the life of the world. The Passion, the self sacrificing ritual of Christ does not have its roots in intellectual ideas, but in the primordial passion of the Great Mother who dies, or whose beloved daughter or son dies, to ensure that the world will grow green again with spring. It is not an accident that the birthday of Jesus is at the winter solstice when the sun is reborn, or that his death and resurrection correlate with the spring equinox when the world is reborn. Jesus Christ was the last vegetation deity of the Near Eastern world, or all that remained of one. pitting himself against the rational corruption of urban Rome as it extended into the ancient Holy Land. But a vegetation god makes no sense separate from earth, ecstatic cycles, and the female moon. The Jewish Essene like communities have broken utterly with pagan vision and rhythms. They were anti earth, anti body, anti woman. In the aesthetic, in the ascetic, ascetic aridity, I have to look those up, of the desert. Okay, arid. Ascetic. Arid of the dryness of the desert, they raised up disembodied male spirits against the flesh. So there's absence of water of the mother. Okay. Um, they raised up disembodied male spirit against the flesh, the world, and the devil. The Neolithic garden of oneness with the goddess was gone. What was left was a dry and fervent patriarchal war of the spirit against everything alive. Interesting. Jesus Christ, the last vegetation god of the Neolithic Near East, bloomed in a desert. He bloomed as a devastating sun, withering to all life. All he could die for was an afterworld. Can I read that again? Jesus Christ, the last vegetation god of the Neolithic Near East, bloomed in a desert. He bloomed as a devastating sun, withering to all life. All he could die for was an afterworld. Thank you for liking and subscribing. Please don't forget to hit that notification bell. That way you will know when I upload a new reading or when I go live. Thank you. Appreciate y'all. See you later. Bye.